case can be raised. And the reason being that if we are unable to control the way such requests are made, then at any given point in time, people can just stand up and be calling for it whenever, there is any impending election. Yes, we all admit that at the early stages of the registration or the transfer exercise, there was a software glitch, which usually happens. And this has to do with the issue of the illegal transfer using the ID card system, which the software was not able to detect the anomaly that occurred. That is something that the EC itself admitted to and provided measures to be able to control such anomaly. That is understood. Now that the transfers has taken place, what we need to know is that has there been an astronomical increase in the transfer that occurred? That's the first question. I believe that this data is always available, and we can compare this with the previous election years where transfers have been effected. When we compare the chart, are we trying to say that the transfers that are carried out, has there been any astronomical increase that has resulted in a problem or an issue that raises eyebrows? If there is, then we would like to know or to have such data. I believe that it will be in the EC's own interest to be able to pull out this chart, to be able to show not just to the NDC, but to all the political parties, to look at it constituency by constituency, right? That in the past, 3 elections we've had, whether there has been a mass transfer from one constituency to the other, so that we can all do the math, the analysis, so that we will be able to find out what attributed that large transfers that did occur. Yes, we understand that the NDC has a case. I hear arguments or some commentators of the party coming out to say that even there are people who might have died in the course of the transfers and everything. And all these things always happen. It's not something new. Even on the day of election, unfortunately, I'm sorry to say this, people who die, maybe due to illness or accidents or anything. So such data, we usually have issues. Also adding up to the list. But to be honest, based on the question you asked, the answer that I will give is that the data should have been presented to the EC. This is my personal opinion on it, so that we will all be able to authenticate and audit whether indeed such large transfers were carried out. Were they strongholds of the NDC? Were they strongholds of the opposition, the governing MPP party, or anything, so that we can all interrogate it? That's what I can say to the question that you asked.
Doc, how long from where you sit, if you were called tomorrow to say, come and assist with the forensic audit of what the NDC is calling for, how long will it last? Will it take, for example?
Let's remember that here we are dealing with data, and data is truth. Once we start pulling the requisite information that we are looking for, within the next day or two, such information should be available. The only thing that might delay is the request that the NDC is coming up with, as whether the information that they are looking for would require, much detailed, audits that will have to be done and all that. But once the request or the questions that they are putting out is clear, then it's very easy to be able to pull this out, because this is a database. And with database, whatever information you are looking for, once you are able to input the right query, you can be able to pull all these things out. Because the audit they are requesting for wouldn't just be an audit for the transfer that were carried out, the transfer exercise that was carried out just recently.
Right.
We have to compare that with the previous 3 or 4 transfer periods during election times that we've had, to be able to compare and to be able to have a much more broader view as to how these, whether the current transfer exercise was astronomical in terms of the percentages that we had, or whether it fell within the range that usually transfers have usually been carried out.
And the NDC is adamant. They still insist that we will not come to the table as the Electoral Commission is asking us for. We will insist on this audit to be done. Do we have time on our hands to do it? It's 80 days to the big election. If we do this audit, then we'll have to re-exhibit the register for everybody to go and recheck if their names are there. Do we have the luxury of the time?
I'm glad that you have brought this particular question out, because after the transfers, there are still a number of exercises that the EC would have to conduct in order to be able to validate and authenticate some of these transfers that were carried out, and so on and so forth, by the LI that established this current, election that we are going to have. It has a constitutional mandate to even set up a committee that can be able to, as it were, sit on cases of individuals they suspect, that is from any political party suspect might have carried out an illegal transfers and so on. These are all works at hand, which if we are to continue with the demonstration, if we are to continue with the Tempest School and all that, especially when we don't have, the luxury of time and all that.
Hello, sir.
To the table, so that we can all sit, that is, the various political parties, the stakeholders in the political session, because this will require people who are into IT, people who know much about forensic audit, IT forensic audit, so they will be able to really interrogate and, validate the various transfers which were carried out. Because going on the street, yes, we've all heard the noise that is actually going out loud and clear. But the next thing is to be able to go to the EC, because even after the demonstration, the petition was still presented to the EC. It is the EC that is a custodian of the database that has all the various transfers, the election and the voter register.
Right.
So the best thing is to sit down with the EC. All the political parties can bring their various IT, auditors to also come and sit in. Let's all interrogate it. Yes, the NDC or the NPP or whoever can still go ahead and then even hire people who are professionals into it to also help them to be able to interrogate the data that will be presented. To me, I think that should rather be the best way forward.
Now, the Electoral Commission has assured the NDC and the general public that the missing BVDs and laptops will have no effect on the elections and the results thereof. From an IT point of view, is the Electoral Commission telling us the full story?
I think the missing laptops and the electoral materials that was uncovered was a very unfortunate situation. But one thing I would say to it is that any system that has any input is still traceable. That is, once the EC has serialized their laptops, once they have a unique ID or information on the systems that they use, the electoral materials they use in the registration exercise and the transfers and all that. One thing I would say is that it is therefore quite easy to be able to authenticate whether any of these systems were in fact used to carry out any registration elsewhere. So with this, I think it will also require forensic, analysts and IT auditors like us to be able to have full access to the system. Where we see from another standpoint of view, I also admit that they are also caught up in a web as to how much information can they give out to a third party. And I've also heard this coming from some NPP communicators also saying that they would resist any other body that will be invited in to also help in unraveling this. But that is also a conversation for another time. But all I'm trying to say here is that the EC has a mandate to protect the register. It has a mandate to be able to work with the previous, documents and the voter registration, because it's a security breach to have such information exposed, because it tells the whole world about where you live, your contact information, and other personal information about you, which they also hold the mandate to be able to protect. And as a result of that, we should be able to understand the context with which the EC is also coming from. Yet, I believe that once we are able to interrogate this as a country, all the stakeholders in the election sitting down together with the EC, instead of going on demonstration and other things happening. Yes, demonstration is something that is allowed by our constitution. But the best part is once we are all able to sit together and interrogate the data, know what is truly happening on the ground, where there are large transfers and what's attributed to that. If we compare this to previous elections, do we see any significant difference in the transfers that has been done? If not, then we can let sleeping dogs lie.
Well, but Doc, the elections as we know in this country, whoever becomes president needs 50% of the votes plus just one. So it's not enough to say that, well, if we compare and contrast the numbers from the previous election and this election, and we look at the numbers and it doesn't really weigh, one vote is enough to get somebody to win the presidency.
I'm very glad you actually mentioned this. Let's remember that these transfers are not new people who are being registered. These are people within Ghana, whether they are in Ghana or outside Ghana. These are people whose names and information are already in the register. So whether the transfer is from Ablikuma to Nandom or to Tamale South and so on, the vote is still going to count for the presidency.
Well, but if I have not, but sorry, if I vote at Ablikuma South and I turn up on election day and my name is at Kumeu, I don't have the luxury of time to travel from Ablikuma South to Kumeu to go and cast my vote, which means that I would have been disenfranchised, which also means that the possibility of, as the NDC is saying, somebody being made to vote for me or the system manipulating to vote on my behalf and decide against my will is there. And that's a problem. If I have not transferred my vote, why should my vote be moved anyway?
Okay, then I'm now hearing the arguments that you're actually coming up with, because as at this time, I was just dealing with the usual transfers that did occur. If there is any such thing, I believe that 80 days is still enough for a final exhibition to be carried out.
Right.
That is, if the arguments that the NDC is coming out with is interrogated and it's realized that there is some validity in it. Yes, then for issues or instances where people who have not made any request for transfers but has been transferred to other constituencies, then becomes justifiable. Because just in the last election, in the last exhibition, I went to authenticate to check whether my name was indeed in the register and everything. And I actually checked. You know, the attitude of most Ghanaians, they would not go and check. They would wait until the election day, hoping that everything is intact. So if that's the argument being raised, then I would request that the EC goes ahead and then carry out a very final exhibition so that anyone who has issues of
thank you very much. Grateful. Dr. Edward Danso Ansong, IT expert, Investor Ghana, Legon. Thank you very much indeed for your time this morning. Good morning. Thank you. And it's some 9 minutes after 9 here. Kwame A Plus is in the building. We'll host in a bit. But listen to Dr. Kwejo Afarijan.
I've thought that nobody would be happy about what recently was happening.